Thank you too. So today, the Tibetans in North America, I have this opportunity. Teaching online. Talk to you. Because of my age, it's very getting difficult for me to travel far. So it's easy to have this kind of a webcast of my teachings while I remain in Dharamsala. So I'm meeting you, the Tibetans in North America, through this webcast. So as Tibetans, we are Tibetans from the land of snows. Well, before Songtsen Gampo was born in Tibet, Tibetans more or less lived like nomads, similar to the Mongolians. And after Songtsen Gampo's arrival, he has been really great. On the one hand, he married a Chinese princess, and with the Chinese princess came the most a sacred statue of Buddha to Tibet, the Cho statue. So though there was this familial relationship with the Chinese emperor, Songtsen Gampo must have also enjoyed Chinese food. But when he saw the Tibetan Chinese script, the writing system, he found it quite complicated. So, first introduction to Buddhism to Tibet must have been through China at that time, with the arrival of Cho Shakyamuni statue along with the Chinese princess. But unlike the Chinese script, Songtsen Gampo started the new Tibetan script writing system based on the Indian Devanagari system with the consonants and vowels, unlike Chinese. And then in the 8th century, though we already had established a relationship with China, but when it came to Buddhism, Tizong Detsen also looked at India to invite Buddhism, and during his time he invited the Abbot Chandarakshita to Tibet, and who advised the Tibetans to by saying that instead of having to learn Sanskrit or Pali to study Buddhism, you should translate into your own language, since you have your written script. And it is even said that the great Abbot Chandarakshita himself took interest in studying Tibetan. So since then, the teachings of the Buddha, which may have been in Pali, Sanskrit, which were in Sanskrit and Pali, and perhaps also Nepalese, have been translated into Tibetan. So we today have the Kanjur and Tenjur translated words of the Buddha and the commentarial treatises by Indian masters into Tibetan. So perhaps there were a few of the Nepalese texts as well, which were translated into Tibetan at that time. And therefore, the Tibetan Buddhism that we have in Tibetan is very accurate to the translation. And Chandarakshita himself was a great philosopher as well. He wrote, he was a great philosopher as well as, and he wrote his own text, The Ornament of the Middle Way. So the Buddhist tradition that we received from India, through this Master Chandarakshita, is the Nalanda tradition. So he had studied, Chandarakshita had studied philosophy, Madhyamaka philosophy, as well as the epistemological texts, such as Tattva Samgraha, the Compendium of Reality. And with regard to the texts on logic and epistemology that were in Indian language, written by masters like such Dharmakirti, there are mainly 7 different treatises on logic and epistemology by him, which have been translated into Tibetan, which is whereas these were not translated into Chinese. So we usually refer to the study of the 5 canonical texts, and one of them is logic and epistemology, and then there are the studies of the perfection of wisdom teachings, and Madhyamaka, the middle way teachings, and then the Abhidharma and Vinaya, the monastic course of discipline. And so we, as Tibetans, have the tradition, which exists only in the Tibetan tradition, the study of these great classics of India, where we study this Madhyamaka middle philosophy as well as the logic and reasoning. And so this same tradition has also spread to Mongolia. After Mongolia came in contact with the Tibetans, and especially the 3rd Dalai Lama, Sonam Gyatso, once when I was doing a pilgrimage in India, I went to Nalanda. It was, of course, Nalanda today is only in ruins. And I think we also recited Madhyamaka Avatara by Chandrakirti, the entering the middle way. And this institution, Nalanda, in the past was a great study center. But today, we only find it in ruins. And so, therefore, because this Nalanda tradition has been preserved by us Tibetans, I felt very proud that we have been able to preserve this tradition very well. And so, if you look at history, Shandarakshita had advised the Tibetan king, Emperor Tuzong to translate the teachings of the Buddha into Tibetan. And since then, we have these Kanjur and Tenjur, the translated words of the Buddha and the exegetical treatises. And I usually tell people that these texts, scriptures, are for us to study. This should be used as our study syllable. And then we have commentaries to Indian texts by Tibetan masters. So we have engaged in the study of Buddhism, though initially we were nomads, like the Mongolians. But we have been able to transform ourselves into students of the Buddha, where we not just follow it on the faith, but we do extensive study of the teaching of the Buddha, and also reflect on the meaning and do meditation on the teaching. Whereas Pali tradition has, of course, spread, the three baskets or the collections of the teachings have spread in Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, and so forth. They do not have the text or study of the epistemological texts. So they follow the teaching of the Buddha based on scriptural authority of the Buddha, the authority of the Buddha, and they do not use logic to explain these teachings. So I tell them that you are like people without teeth. When you come across something quite hard and difficult to tackle in the scriptures, you cannot chew on it. Whereas in the Nalanda tradition, we follow the statement of the Buddha, where he said, "O Buddha, monks and scholars, just as gold is tested by burning, cutting, and rubbing, likewise you should examine my teaching thoroughly and then follow it, not because you have faith in or devotion to me." And so the Nalanda tradition, the Nalanda masters, followed this statement of the Buddha. Nalanda masters like Master Nagarjuna and his disciples, and his followers like Master Chandrakirti. So we consider the study of Parchin, study of Prajnaparamita text, and then middle way and logic and epistemology, very important. And in Tibet in the past, the monks used to spend at least 20 to 30 years to study these different texts. And regarding myself, I memorized Abhisamaya Alankara, which is used to study for the study of the perfection of wisdom, and then Madhyamaka and the Madhyamaka Avatara, and I also memorized certain parts of the Pramana Vartika and Abhidharma Kosha, Karika. And then Master Chandrakirti Master Chandrakirti has said that this at the end of the Madhyamaka Avatara, verse number 55, He says, this suchness just explained is most profound and terrifying, yet people with past habituation will certainly realize it. Others, however, despite vast learning, will fail to comprehend. So those others refer to masters like Vasubandhu, Dignaga, and so forth. And so what we in the Tibetan tradition do is to study the texts, different texts or the teachings of the Buddha through logic and reasoning. And we do not accept certain teachings of the Buddha literally, and therefore we have the interpretation of those teachings, which cannot be taken literally. And in so within the Tengyur, the exegetical treatises of Indian scholars, we make distinction between the Madhyamakas. Within the Madhyamakas, the Prasangikas and Savatantrika Madhyamakas, and in Tibet, the most prevalent philosophical tradition that we follow is the Prasangika Madhyamakas, the consequentialist. And then in the Madhyamaka Avatara, and in verse number 35 of, no, it's number 34 of the 6th chapter of Madhyamaka, the Avatara, if the intrinsic characteristics of these things were to arise dependently, things would come to be destroyed by denying it. Emptiness would then be a cause for the destruction of things, but this is illogical. So no real entities exist. And then verse number 35, 36, and 37. Empty things depend on convergences such as reflections and so on are not unknown. And just as from an empty thing like a reflection, a perception can arise that bears its form. Likewise, all things are empty. They do arise from emptiness in the robust way. So no intrinsic nature exists in either of the two truths. Phenomena are neither eternal nor annihilated. So these 5 verses show that if you assert things were to have any intrinsic existence, then these logical absurdities would befall you. So I recite these verses of the Madhyamaka Avatara, entering the middle way, on a daily, and reflect on these meanings. And then when you do the analysis through the sevenfold analysis of chariot, you will not be able to find anything having any intrinsic existence. But things do exist by way of convention, the Madhyamaka Avatara says. And so these philosophical views are to combat our misperception of reality. And then Master Shantideva And then with regard to exchanging self and others, the teachings that are found in Master Shantideva's text, very powerful. He says, unless you exchange your joy and happiness with the suffering of others, live alone reaching Buddhahood, even in samsara, the cycle of existence, you will not be happy. And he says, all happiness in the world comes from wishing others to be happy, and all suffering from wishing oneself own to be happy. And what need is there to say more? Look at the difference between the Buddhas and the ordinary sentient beings. And so, as quoted earlier, even in the world, in this ordinary world, if you remain selfish, whether you are politicians or merchants or scientists and so forth, if you remain selfishly motivated, cherishing yourself alone, there's always going to be trouble and problems and difficulties. And so these lines of Master Shantideva are very powerful to reduce our self-cherishing attitude, and also the Madhyamaka Avatara and the entering the middle way and so forth are very powerful to combat our grasping at true objective existence and things and beings. So even in quantum physics, they say that if you cling to objective existence in things, then there is going to be an attachment and so forth. And so even quantum physicists say that things do not, though they appear to have some objective existence, they do not exist in that way. So this is what the quantum physics says. So once one of my Indian scholars has told me that the quantum physics, as a modern scientist was developed in the West, whereas in India, the concept of quantum physics was already discovered to over 2,000 years back. So this is true, because in our Madhyamaka text, the Pasankhya Madhyamakas say that things exist merely by way of designation or imputation, and nothing exists independently. So, regarding myself, I memorized the Abhisamaya Alankara and also some text on logic, and I studied philosophy through dialectical debate. Of course, I wasn't a very hard-working student, and late Genpema Gyaltsen used to say that if the Dalai Lama had been studying the great texts like the ordinary monks do in the monastic institutions, he would be an excellent scholar. So this, whether this is a praise or what, I mean, it's quite true. But I can say that I'm not a very poor student of Buddhism compared to the monastics in the big institutions. So in other words, what I'm saying is that even though I was recognized, I was the Dalai Lama, I'm the Dalai Lama, I had not been given any exception when it comes to pursuing the study of these great treatises. So during my studies, my senior tutor, Yongzhen Ling Rinpoche, used to keep a whip next to where he sat, where I was doing my studies. And there were two whips that he kept. One was an ordinary one, and one was for the all-knowing His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which was yellow in color. Whether it was an ordinary one or the special whip, if it was used on me, I would suffer. And when we were in Potala in the winter, when we were in Nopolenka, these whips were kept in Nopolenka, and when we moved to Potala in the winter, these whips also moved with us to Potala. So I was studying out of fear. Yongzhen Ling Rinpoche, of course, was very skillful in his dealing with me during when I was doing my studies. So whatever the case, today, in the past, of course, Tibetan Buddhism was referred to as Lamaism, which means that it was not an authentic teaching of the Buddha, and it's doubtful that it's an authentic teaching of the Buddha. That was the idea. But after we came into exile, now people know that our tradition is not Lamaism, but we belong to the Nalanda tradition, and we practice the teaching by combining study and meditation. And we are able to sit side by side with this modern scientists. So I'm proud that we follow reason and logic and investigate or analyze the teaching of the Buddha, just like the scientists do. Investigate the reality of things. So for the last 4 decades, I have been interacting with the scientists, and over time, we know that the scientists are more or less focused on material, matter, and not the mind as such. And with regard to our mind, mental disturbances in mind, it has to be tackled with the positive states of mind, and so that these disturbances subside, not through any kind of appeals. So what disturbs our mind is due to our grasping at absolute existence in things and beings. So many scientists appreciate our tradition with regard to the explanation about our mind and emotions. So these days I've been talking about physical hygiene and mental hygiene or emotional hygiene.
Emotional hygiene, medical hygiene,
So, of course, with regard to the former, it is something that everybody takes care of. But with regard to the emotional hygiene, we have a very rich tradition, and many scientists are learning from us. So in the past, we used to wear this hat of Lamaism, but today, after having discussions with many scientists and scholars, we have been able to remove this hat of Lamaism, and we are today wearing the scientific hat. So many scientists, many people also say that I am a scientist. So this is because we follow reason and logic. So the Tibetan Buddhist tradition can be called a world treasure, a universal treasure. So with regard to mind and emotions, of course, we do not follow the teachings through mere scriptural authority, but using logic through the study of the logical and epistemological texts. So therefore, our tradition is a universal treasure of the world. So for over 1,000 years, what we have preserved, we have been preserving it even after coming into exile. And not only doing that, but we are able to share it with the rest of the world, so that people benefit from this tradition. So this is a great contribution from us Tibetans. And because of this, the Tibetan tradition has gained respect and people value our tradition. And the Tibetans, of course, inside Tibet, have a very unshakable faith in the teaching of the Buddha. We, of course, follow the practices of doing prostrations and so forth, and these cannot be called blind faith now. And we are following the teaching of the Buddha, and particularly the Nalanda tradition. This flawless tradition of the teaching of the Buddha that we follow is based on logic and reason. And we can see today on TVs and the computer screens how devoted the Tibetans inside Tibet are. So this tradition that we are following is not only based only on faith, blind faith, but reason. So we, the Tibetans in exile, have been preserving this tradition, and we will continue to do so that people value our tradition further. So without having to talk about past, future lives and so forth, our tradition has the potential to help us in this life also. So even though people may not have any religious beliefs, this tradition that we have can help them cope or tackle their problems with their mental disturbances. And therefore, there are more and more people and scientists taking interest in this tradition. So, as Tibetans, what I've been talking about is the universal treasure of the Buddha. I was born in the Dome or Amdo. 3 letters, A, Ka, and Ma. A referring to Amdo, and Ka referring to Kumbum, and Ma, it's not very clear what it signifies, but according to my investigation, I think that Ma refers to my female name, which is Lhamo Dundrup. So there was a prophecy, it is said that there will be a person who will be born a boy but will have a girl's name. So in any case, I was born in a very remote area of the Tibet, the northeastern Tibet region of Amdo. And today, this peasant boy born in a very remote village has been able to make a small contribution to raise the status of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition in the world. So we, in our literature, the Buddhist literature, we have lots of information which can be studied as academic subject, whether people are following Islam or Christianity or any religion or not. So this tradition that we have is something that is relevant to the whole world today. So though you who are living in North America are living in the communities of Judeo-Christian community as well as people following Islam, but the secular tradition of India is very important, whereas religion is, of course, an individual matter.
Academic subject.
So many of the topics that we come across in our tradition can be considered academic subjects. And when we came into exile, in the beginning, we requested Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the then Indian Prime Minister, to establish schools, separate schools for Tibetan children, and he did comply to our request. And then the monastic institutions of learning have been also re-established in India, and successfully. So in our settlements in India, we have the Tibetan secular schools and monastic institutions. So those of you in America, in the Americas, it would be good for you to also pursue the study of our Buddhist traditions. And when I was in New York, when I was in America once, I met Pritzker family, one member of the Pritzker family, who told me that the reason why they took Tibetans as part of the rehabilitation scheme is because of the moral principles that you Tibetans have, which can be used as an example to the American people. So in Chicago, also we have a Tibetan community who moved there as part of that program. So wherever you are, you should be able to preserve our culture and also be principled with love, compassion, morality, and so forth, that you can be an example to the people in your community, the Westerners. So that's all. So as far as coming to America, I have a friend, an American wealthy friend, who told me that he would send his own private jet plane so that I could stop after a few hours somewhere and then travel to America. But America is very far away. So as I said before, it doesn't make a difference if I'm able to interact with people through the internet. So I do not smell, I do not have the bad smell, but maybe smell of morality I have, but you will not be able to smell it. But that doesn't matter. You are able to hear me. So first, we'll go through the teaching. So first, the 8 verses of mind training. Geshe Langri Thangpa was someone who practiced Bodhisattva so much so that he was feeling sometimes very sad, and so he looked very gloomy. He was known as the gloomy Langri Thangpa. So verse number 1. With the determination to achieve the highest aim for the benefit of all sentient beings, the sentient beings who are the objects of our love and compassion. And with regard to bodhicitta, it is that factor which leads you from out of the lower realms of existence and leading you to the higher realms of existence, and finally to the deathless state of Buddhahood. So, rebirth into the lower realms of existence, the bad transmigrations, is because of our unruly mind. And so bodhicitta averts it. And then it also creates the complete course for higher rebirth. And then the deathless state, which is liberation. And so bodhicitta is said to be very powerful. In the beginning of Madhyamaka Avatara, Chandrakirti praises. So in his Madhyamaka Avatara, rather than praising any other objects of refuge and so forth, he praises their great compassion. As he says, as compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood, the water that nourishes it, and the fruit that is long a source of enjoyment, I'll praise compassion at the start of all. And so, with regard to compassion, It is that state of mind where you wish to liberate sentient beings from suffering. And so this is the verse number 1, which surpasses even the wish-fulfilling gem. May I hold them dear at all times. And so there was a general explanation. And then whether I interact with someone, may I view myself as the lowest amongst all. And from the very depths of my heart, respectfully hold others as fondly superior. So you are respecting all sentient beings and expressing and feeling love towards others. But usually we have a sense of pitying others. That's not the case here. We are being respectful to others. In all my deeds, may I probe into my mind. As soon as mental and emotional afflictions arise as they endanger myself and others, may I strongly confront them and avert them. So whatever you are doing, whether you are sitting, walking, and so forth, you are not letting yourself be carried away by these mental afflictions. But even in dream, if you are used to meditating on love and compassion, used to thinking about love and compassion and so forth, even in dreams you'll dream about them. So these shows familiarity with these states of mind. So in all my deeds may I probe my mind, and as soon as mental afflictions arise, as they endanger myself and others, may I strongly confront and avert them. When I see beings of unpleasant character oppressed by strong negativity and suffering, may I hold them dear, for they are rare to find, as if I have discovered a jewel treasure. So when you encounter people who are angry with you, angry at you, you should feel more compassionate towards them. So in the Madhyama, in Shantideva's Bodhisattva Charya Avatara, he says that the enemies should be viewed or regarded as your best teacher, because they give the opportunity to practice patience. Whereas with regard to, in relation to our near and dear ones, we grow attachment. So in order to practice bodhicitta, you need to practice patience. And that comes when there is a provocator of anger within yourself, so that you can practice patience. So we cannot practice patience in relation to our near and dear ones, but we can practice these patience in relation to people who criticize us and who make us angry. When others, out of jealousy, treat me wrongly with abuse, slander, and scorn, may I take upon myself the defeat and offer to others the victory. When someone whom I have helped or in whom I have placed great hopes mistreat me in extremely hurtful ways, may I regard him still as my precious teacher. In brief, may I offer the benefit and joy to all my mothers, both directly and indirectly. May I quietly, secretly take upon myself all hurts and pains of my mother. So here, secrecy refers to the practice of equaling and exchanging self and others. So what you are exchanging here is the positive positivity that of you, your positivities to others, send them to others, and you take on the negativities of others. So secretly here refers to the practice of giving and taking, Tonglen. May all this remain undefiled by the stains of the 8 mundane concerns, and may I recognize all things as illusion. So recognize all things as illusion is refers to the view of emptiness. So of course the main text for studying about emptiness that we have is the Madhyamaka, Mulla Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental treatise of the middle way. This is the principal text. Sometimes I tend to boast and feel proud. I sometimes think that when Master Nagarjuna was living, I may have been somewhere amongst his disciples, somewhere in the corner of a crowd. And then, because his texts, I feel very close to his teachings, and which are very powerful. And then Master Chandrakirti's text, Madhyamaka Avatara, and its auto commentary also, I find very helpful. Devoid of clinging, be released from bondage. So Master Nagarjuna, as I said before, if you were to search for the identity of things and self, nothing whatever can be pinpointed as being this or that. But that doesn't mean things don't exist. They exist by way of designation, mere designation. So in Madhyamaka Avatara, it is said that nothing can be found when you analyze them through the sevenfold analysis that you do on the basis on a chariot. Nothing can be found, whatever, when you search for their identity, but things do exist by way of worldly renown. So this is very powerful to say that things exist merely by way of designation. So all things do appear as if they exist from their own side, objectively. So, with regard to this text, the 8 verses of mind training, which teaches both the conventional and ultimate bodhicittas. So I recite this text on a daily basis. And then next we have the text on the 37 verses of practices of the Bodhisattvas. So Ngulchu refers to the hermitage that he lived, the author. Ngulchu Geshe Thokme Sangpo, Ngulchu refers to that hermitage, and Gyalsey refers to Bodhisattva. So he was not a prince of a king or anything like that, but he, because of his practice of bodhicitta and his experience of bodhicitta, he became a bodhisattva, and therefore he was called Gyalsey. And he was a contemporary of Budin Rinpoche, and his real name was Thokme Sangpo. And Budin Rinpoche was once said to have asked Ngulchu Geshe Thokme Sangpo to blow on his arm where he had some pain. And so this text written by Ngulchu Geshe Thokme Sangpo So it's a practice of the Bodhisattvas. So it has 37 verses on the Bodhisattva practice. And therefore it's called the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas. So in one of his writings, it is said, so when he was living in the Ngulchu Hermitage, so he says he's giving this hard advice to the disciples, to his disciples, being moistened, his eyes and his mind being moistened by love and compassion. And so he was practicing bodhicitta, and therefore he says, he gives this advice. So Namo Lokeshwaraya, you see all phenomena neither come nor go, yet you work solely for the benefit of beings. Supreme Guru and Protector Chandrasik, to you continually I bow with body, speech and mind. And so the first two lines is similar to the rejection of the 8 extremes as we find in the verses of salutation of Mula Madhyamaka Karika. And so, though you see phenomena neither come nor go, so there is no coming and going intrinsically, yet things exist by way of designation. And so you see both the truths, the ultimate and the conventional truth, so those things have no coming and going, yet you work solely for the benefit of beings in conventional terms. So, Supreme Guru and Protector Chandrasik, to you I continually bow with body, speech and mind. To the perfect Buddha, sources of benefit and happiness arise from practicing the genuine Dharma, which in turn depends on knowing how to practice. Here I'll explain the Bodhisattva practices. Now that you have obtained this precious human body, the great boat so difficult to find, so during the daytime, when you reflect on the teachings, you will also dream about that in your sleep. So sometimes what you reflect on during the daytime becomes more clear, and during this dreaming time, because during sleep, all these 5 senses have stopped functioning, and therefore you only remain with the mind, and therefore it's more powerful to reflect on those topics that you have thought about or reflected during the daytime. And so I have this experience sometimes, not all the time, of course. So, in order to free yourself and others from the ocean of samsara, listening, reflecting and meditating with diligence day and night is the practice of a bodhisattva. So verse number, so listening, reflecting, meditating with diligence day and night is the practice of a bodhisattva. Verse numbered 1. So in living in a human community, of course, we feel desire and anger and so forth. And therefore, this verse number 2 shows how to counter that. Passion towards friends churns like water. Hatred towards enemies burns like enemy. Through dark ignorance, one forgets what to adopt and what to reject. To abandon one's homeland is the practice of bodhisattvas. giving up negative places, mental afflictions gradually decrease. With no distractions, virtuous activities naturally increase. When mind becomes clear, conviction in the Dharma is born. Seeking solitude is the practice of bodhisattvas. So this verse number 3 shows the quality of seeking solitude. And then next is showing that of impermanence of life. So we leave imprints on our minds when we create some karma, bad or good. And then because of those imprints left on the mind, we experience the results of them. So friends and relatives acquainted for long will separate and so forth. And verse number 5 also done. And verse number 6. Verse number 7. Themselves captives in the prison of samsara, whom can the worldly gods protect? Therefore, to seek refuge in the three jewels, who do not betray you, is the practice of a bodhisattva. So, of course, we may be able to seek help from spirits, Gyalpo and Senpo and so forth, but they do not form the objects of refuge for us. The suffering of the three lower realms, so difficult to bear, is what the Buddha taught to be the fruit of negative actions. Therefore, even at the cost of your life, never to commit negative actions is the practice of bodhisattvas. So when you help others, you are creating the causes for good. Whereas if you harm others, out of anger, you create negative karmas. And therefore, the result will be suffering in the next lives. And therefore, it is said that suffering in the lower realms so difficult to bear is what the Buddha taught to be the fruit of negative actions. Therefore, even at the cost of your life, never to commit negative actions, the perfect practice of bodhisattvas. Happiness in the three realms, like dew on a blade of grass, is subject to instant fading away. To strive for the supreme state of liberation that never wavers is the practice of bodhisattvas. And verse number 10 also read. All suffering, verse number 11 shows exchanging. So this verse number 11 shows the practice of equaling and exchanging self and others. So you reflect on the disadvantages or the shortcomings of self-cherishing attitude and the advantages of the cherishing others over oneself. Verse number 12. So there's a story behind this. Gyalsey Thokme Sangpo, the author, received a lot of offerings from people, and when he was on his way, so on that route, it is known that there were bandits and thieves. So Kundal Lama Rinpoche used to tell me this story that he gave all these offerings to the people who wanted to rob him, and then so even if someone driven by excessive desire steals your wealth or incites someone else to steal it, to dedicate to this person your body's possessions and all your virtue of the three times is the practice of bodhisattvas. Verse number 13 also. read, if someone cuts off your head, so this is showing practice of not getting angry, and even the taking on this negativities and suffering, anger and so forth upon yourself. Verse number 14, should someone slander you in blind words. Verse number 15, 16, read. 17, so next, when we do practice, though gripped by poverty and always scorned, though stricken by acute illness and possessed by evil spirits, so even if you face lots of difficulties in life, it may cause you to slacken in your efforts to practice bodhicitta. And then, when you become too famous, verse number 19, though famous and prominent, someone to whom. So when you become famous and well known, this also can cause you to have, when you are praised by others and become famous, it may cause you to feel pride and arrogance, and therefore you should counter that. This is what verse number 19 shows. So if you have not pacified the enemy of your anger, combating outer opponents will only make them multiply. Therefore, with an army of loving kindness and compassion, to tame your mind is the practice of a bodhisattva. And verse number 21 read, 22 shows all appearances are your own mind. And this shows the practice of meditation on emptiness. So, the author, Thokme Sangpo, I think maybe his own philosophical view is that of this Chittamatra philosophical view. So all appearances are your mind, and mind itself primordially transcends all mental fabrications. So though everything that appears to you, whether external objects, the objects that appear to you from the outside or your own experiences, they are your mental projections. And then when you check the mind itself, it disintegrates, it's transient. Moment by moment it changes. Knowing this, and to remain free from apprehending the signs of subject and object, so whether it's a subjective experiences or the objects, is the practice of a bodhisattva. When you encounter objects that please your mind, like rainbows in the summer season, though they seem beautiful, not to view them as real and to give up attachment to them is the practice of bodhisattvas. All suffering is like death of your child in a dream, and so forth. And then verse number 25 down teaches the 6 perfections. So first, generosity, perfection of generosity. And now verse number 26. So to observe the discipline with no longing for worldly existence or worldly pleasures or excellences is the practice of bodhisattva. Verse number 27. Shows the practice of patience. Verse number 28. 28 shows the practice of perfection of effort. And then verse number 29, knowing this and to cultivate meditative concentration that transcends the four formless states. And verse number 30 read. Verse number 31. If you do not analyze your own faults, you might put on a dharmic facade while behaving in a non-dharmic way. Therefore, to continually analyze your faults and then discard them is the practice of a bodhisattva. Verse number 32 read. Verse number 33 read. 34. Verse number 36. In brief, wherever you are, whatever you do, always examine the state of your mind. Continuously working for the welfare of others is the practice of a bodhisattva. And then verse number 37 is dedication. Then, by relying on the words of genuine masters, I explain the meaning of taught in the sutras, tantras, and other treatises in the form of these 37 bodhisattva practices to benefit those who wish to train on the bodhisattva's path. Because my intelligence is small and my studies few, I lack linguistic skills. Nevertheless, since the vastness of bodhisattva contact is difficult to fathom, and so forth, and then the final verse. So this was written in for his own and others' benefit by the monk Thokme, an exponent of scripture and reasoning in the precious cave of Ngulchu. So this text that I use was printed by Labdun Rinpoche, and he has written a colophon to benefit all beings and for the flourishing of the tradition of the Buddha Dharma, and particularly that of the Master Tsongkhapa's tradition. So as requested to him, the sponsor Dorje Tsawang dedicates the virtues or the merits from this printing for the sponsors' families. So I remember I was in Darjeeling, and Labdun Rinpoche had sent this complimentary copy to me from Tibet. So because this text is very full of blessings, Kunu Lama Rinpoche, I received a teaching from Kunu Lama Rinpoche Tenzin Gyaltsen. I received this transmission on this text from him. So next let's do the question and answer session. So first question is from Gyalsey Sangpo. So with respect to your holiness, I'm doing I'm a medical student, and I'm grateful to you. So when I attend my class, and so when I meet with people who cannot be cured, and there's nothing that the medical professionals can do anything, and therefore people feel very discouraged, and they become very depressed and look very poor. And so I feel very sad. So though I'm a student now, I will be in time. Of course, I'll be a medical professional, and so during those times, how should I manage to deal with such people? So I would like to pray for His Holiness's long life, because you are someone who is able to help so many people in the world. So it is very good that you are doing study. You are a medical student. So crafts, arts and crafts, and also particularly medicine, to become a doctor is very good. So when you treat people, so of course there are incurable diseases, but as Shantideva says, if there is a remedy, why be worried? And if there is no remedy, what is the use of becoming worried and unhappy? And so, if there is no way to cure the diseases, people should not be too depressed and unhappy all the time, because the disease or the sickness is something So when death befalls us, it is usually said in a saying, in a Tibetan saying, even if Vajrapani comes and averts or gets rid of the obstacles, and even if medicine Buddha comes and gives you medicine, and even if you sleep in the laps of Buddha, when death befalls you, and that there's nothing can be done, I mean, you have to die. And so philosophically, in the non-Buddhist traditions, they assert an Atman, an independent self or soul theory, whereas Buddhism does not assert such an independent soul. So in any case, when you die from one life, those who assert an Atman, a soul, this continues from life to life, life after life. So though Buddhism does not assert such an independent soul, we do say that a person or a being is designated or named on the basis of our psychophysical aggregates and mainly our mental continuum. And so, regarding the mind itself, it has no beginning and it has no end. Finally, when you become enlightened, your mind becomes a Buddha's mind. So when death comes, it is like changing your body, but the person still continues. Therefore, in the non-Buddhist texts or the Buddhist texts, a self of a person, the self of a person continues. So you should think about the next life. Whereas, but with regard to the practitioners of Christianity or Islam, they do assert a soul and they can pray to their God or Allah. So there's still some hope. People still should not feel hopeless. So they should do their best to get any treatment that is there, but if there is nothing that can be done, then they should maintain calm state of mind. And then if you're following a Tibetan Buddhist tradition, you can pray to be taken care of by your master, life after life, so that you are able to receive teachings and then finally become enlightened.
Next.
The second question comes from Canada. In the land surrounded by snow mountains, the source of benefit and happiness to all, may you in Gyalsey, may you live until the end of samsara. So I have the opportunity to study Buddhism in Gyalsey Buddhist Center. So what is the relationship between the Bodhisattva and the so from talking from the
social animal such
human society, from the perspective of human society, so we are dependent on social, the community that we live in. So we have survived because of others taking care of us. And then when we grew up, so verse number 10 in the from the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas, from the beginningless time, your mothers have cherished you. And so because we are dependent on others, if you neglect and avoid their happiness, their well-being, this is not right. So what we should do is to do our best to help others. So with regard to Tibetans, for example, we have been able to live, for example, in India, because of this people of this country, the Indians, and then in Asia also, we can extend it to Asia, and we survive because of people living in this continent. And then we can, of course, talk about other sentient beings who are not visible to us. So in other words, we are survive in dependence on those others living in this world. So your life is dependent on others. Whether we talk about the beginningless time or not, we are living in this world of 7 billion people, and we as human beings are social animals. So wherever we are living as human beings, we are dependent on the rest of the people in our communities, wherever you are living.
oneness
And therefore, I usually talk about the oneness,
미직주다 대원
the sense of oneness of humanity,
ene kanda kunla 패주주의하다
that we are same in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering.
소소레
And so,
셈기와 류대와
if you think about others more than your own self, you'll be happier.
Tene tiwa sumba di Minnesota ne chimi shibu ji timse basa immigration lawyer ri ngawandwe wa la ne tiwa kandishwe yi.
So next question is from Minnesota, United States. So for the last 60 years, we have been very fortunate to have an audience of Your Holiness, but Tibetans in Tibet, inside Tibet, do not have this opportunity. Despite that, their devotion to Your Holiness is very firm, and they preserve our religion and culture. So my question is, how should we, Tibetan youth in exile outside Tibet, preserve our culture and tradition?
접시고디 내 가서라 간유 제사를
So I usually tell people that I have resigned from the political responsibility of the Tibetan cause.
미리기 직송
But my responsibility now, I consider to be, is to preserve our culture and the Tibetan environment.
간다
So the Tibetans inside Tibet, it's not so nice to talk like this about myself, but every Tibetan in Tibet, old and young, keep their spirit alive just by my by living. I mean, it holds their spirits as well. So the Tibetan tradition is something which is very profound, as I have already taught, and it is something that can contribute to the world at large, and therefore we should feel pride. So we should not feel depressed because we have lost our land, but we should have this pride, or that we have this profound tradition which can contribute to the rest of the world. So I'm an old man now. So I'm nearly 86 or 87, but I still do pray to live to 100 years or so, but physically, even though I may not be able to do much, but I am someone who is able to keep the Tibetan spirit alive. So the Tibetans inside Tibet are very courageous and dedicated. They have a very strong spirit, and the books that we have published from here reach the Tibet, although the general public may not have access to them, but the universities have access to them. And so some Chinese scholars have said that the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is very scientific. So there is
강에 림보 균이 저는 냐보베신의 차고친 때
So we have been able to preserve our,
대리나로네
despite all the difficulties, the Tibetans have been able to keep their spirit strong and alive. So though we are living in exile, we are able to impact people inside Tibet, which is quite strong impact. So because of our separate language, based on which we have our culture and religion, so these are our soul. So whether you are Buddhist or not, whether you are a believer or not, as Tibetans, the Nalanda tradition that we have in the Tibetan tradition, if you could pay more attention to them, this will actually make us feel proud. So in the past, people referred to us as followers of Lamaism, following only rituals and rites, but today, not to talk about the Buddhist countries, but even the modern scientists are taking interest in studying from us. And so this is our own pride. And so therefore, the younger generation should pay attention to studying. So Sonam Tso, who is also doing medical studies from Sanford, thank you for this opportunity. So you have given us lots of advice and instructions. So what is the most important thing that you want us to keep in our minds? And what should we do for the Tibetan people? Thank you. May you live long. So, all Tibetans in exile, including myself, though we are not in our own country, but this profound tradition that we have, we are preserving it in India, and also those of you who are in the countries like America and so forth. As I said before, whether it has to do with philosophical ideas or logic and so forth, we have this tradition that we can actually boast to others, show off to others, and so this is preserving our tradition, our culture, and while keeping it, preserving it ourselves, we can also share it with others. So we must keep the spirit to continue preserving it, this tradition. So my question is, as a Tibetan American, I've witnessed how competitiveness is a prominent aspect of Western culture that often leads to stress. What advice do you have for individuals to deal with stress while still being successful?
Competition such.
So with regard to competition, so
so
there are two types of competition. So you may think to be the first, to reach the first position, and when you, with that motivation, if you hinder others in their studies, and that is bad competition. Whereas while you wish to become first, to reach first. But if you have the motivation to show example to others, to be an example to others, that's not negative. So you are not hampering others or hindering others to be successful in their studies, but you show example to them. And therefore, with that kind of motivation to be first in competition is not bad. While you work to be successful yourself, if you can actually inspire others, particularly Tibetans around you, and that is also a service to our people as well. So that is good. So next is so Minnesota, Tenzin Norton from Minnesota. In call for revolution, His Holiness has talked about a revolution of love and compassion, which is necessary in today's world. So while we talk about revolution of love and compassion, so I think there should be equality for women in our society, which is not there. So and then there are Tibetans also who are not coming in contact with the Tibetan society, communities. So how should we bring them into our community? So naturally, biologically, it seems that women are more compassionate and loving. So we, of course, are born from our parents, but a mother's love is very powerful. A mother gives milk to children. So with regard to my father, of course, he must have loved me, but it wasn't as strong as our my mother's love. So in Norway, the Finnish in Finland, the head of the state became a woman, and I congratulated her on her winning the election. So I think the women could be more powerful in promoting love and compassion. So in the world, historically, we come across people who are called heroes, but most of them are killers or murderers of other people, and they are mostly men, though there were few women as well. So beginning with rearing their children, the women are better equipped for this love and compassion. And I also suggest that the importance of love and compassion should be taught in schools, which is not there so far. And even scientifically, people say that when you are more relaxed, more calm and compassionate, it helps your health as well.
롱어주 롱어주 para 부즈
So children
내 미릭다 콘술 미릭다 내 최다
before 6 years of age do not talk much about which
미릭가나 서로 이제
background they come from, like race or and so forth. But when they join school system, in schools, because they are not taught about love and compassion, but there's discrimination based on societal status, rich and poor, and so forth. And so, because of these,
secular education 나리야
in secular education, we should include teaching love and compassion in schools through secular means or system.
So,
as Tibetans, of course, we live here in exile. For example, Tibetans living in exile in India, though we are few in number, but we have our own establishments. We have schools and institutions of learning. So we have the Tibetan communities separate in India, in America, also in other countries. Though you may be few in number, some tenth so thousands of Tibetans live in America and other countries also, tens of thousands. So wherever you are, you should have the spirit of being Tibetan and feel proud of our culture and tradition. So even scientists take interest in our culture and religion. So this is something we should be proud of. So the communist Chinese have in the past said that Tibetans know nothing. But this is changing. So we should feel proud, but with a sense of love and compassion and ethics or morality. Wherever we are living as Tibetans, even if you may be one family, you should be able to be an example to the others in the community. So this is also preserving our own culture and tradition, and people will also come to value us and our culture and tradition. Next. Next is Sitting Dechen, who is a nurse in New York. And
Kumongaram sitting the chain, Tadechala, New York, Children Sobe Somi Shikdang, animation Pashigai.
So I am also a member of the Tibetan community of New Jersey. We also have classes with Pari Rinpoche, and there is also a course which is being given in a university or college in
Australia.
So my question is, this year started with the Australian bushfire killing millions of animals, and then with the COVID-19 pandemic, people died, families got separated, business went down. But on the good time, it also gave people a chance to pause and appreciate things. For those, including myself, who are battling through this pandemic, how do you think we should reason ourselves as well as to what actually happened, why it happened? So we, of course, as Buddhists, do say that this pandemic and the bush fires, killings. So why are we? What is the Buddhist explanation for these mishaps happening at one time? So there is individual karmas and also collective karma, due to which we have pains and pleasures as a result. So with regard to this pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, which has spread throughout the world, and it is it has spread widely in America and also in India. And then with regard to the bushfires, which is the result of global warming, so in Brazil also there was bushfire, and in the Amazon forest, and also in Australia. So lots of animals, also many animals have died. So these could be explained only in terms of the karma of those beings. And the pandemic is due to collective karmas. And many people, including scientists and nurses and doctors, are doing their best to, and doctors and scientists, particularly, so generally speaking, as I said earlier, they are due to collective karma. So we cannot do much about it. But when pandemics like this happen, we should not feel depressed and be overcome by low, we should not have low spirit. So you should do your best to keep up with your health. And we should always be more optimistic and not be anxious and overcome by fear, because these weaken our immune system. So you should maintain your spirits high and determination. Of course, when you cannot do anything, then about them you can actually say that it's my karma. And then those following the theistic religions can think about God.
Physiotherapist.
Next is Tenzin Somo from Toronto, who's a physiotherapist. Thank you for giving this opportunity to me. Let me please ask my question in English.
Threatening health conditions. As an acute and critical care physiotherapist myself, I work closely with patients with critical illness, and oftentimes it is evident to me that these patients tend to have low motivations to live. So how can I help someone emotionally cope during these situations? And how to teach myself to set emotional boundaries to prevent myself from mental exhaustion without losing my core compassion and empathy.
Oh yeah.
So
because of more serious illness,
people with serious illnesses, When you meet with people with serious illnesses, you should never lose your heart. You should have self-confidence and peace of mind, which are very important.
다 안더 땡아주 더기 안더 비전을 여버너지리 거기에 그게 미다 내 옛날
As we came across in the text,
사고도야
when you meet with people who are
토도도달이야
stricken by sicknesses and negativities,
다리 숨수 마셔보신 지하디
we should never lose heart, but try to advise them
낭배 다 쳐버치기
as a Buddhist practitioner,
안다 내염 되서 제 탈이야
when you think about this pandemic,
좀 이기 줘
if you can recite Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha,
어디 정기이나 나이디
if you know it,
쇼게 뭐사야
if you can recite this mantra, Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha of Aryatara, which I do on a daily basis in the morning, I pray for the pandemic to subside as soon as possible. And I also recite Shakyamuni Buddha mantra, Om Mune Mune Mahamune Soha. So those who are helping patients, this is one method of helping others, so it doesn't harm in any way. So you may, by reciting the Om Tare Tutare Ture mantra, you may give your work to your lips, but it will not bring any extra money. So as Tibetan, so you can tell people that His Holiness the Dalai Lama is also praying for us, and you should also do the same. A medical student from California. Given the state of our world, with issues like radical division, climate change, and now the hardships caused by the pandemic, what is the responsibility of the youth or younger generation to make our society a better place to live in? So, the present generation of Tibetans, so we should do our best to take medical help, recitation of mantras, and help others, love and compassion. So of course, after 40 to 50 years, as some experts say, the global warming will increase. And the Tibetan plateau also will become like Afghanistan, the waters getting dried up and less vegetation, with less and less vegetation, and so this will happen. So the whole world, or the universe and the cosmos, I mean, there is a phase of evolution of the cosmos, and then abiding, and then in the end, destruction. And so the galaxies have come into being, and then they subsist, and then in the end, they will go away.
차별 내고
So this world is part of these galaxies.
다 쿠유
So at this time, the world exists. But in the end, it will also, because of the change in the environment, through climate change and so forth, it's natural. It's a natural process that the world comes and goes.
강사 써야 돼. 남 강을 때는 딱왜 시조로 돼. 나버 씹어야 돼. 강 주기어리. 그것도 못는 줘야지.
So a person, for example, is designated on the basis of a continuum of a mind. And then we will die and we may be born in other planets, other galaxies, and so forth. So today, people are thinking of going to Mars. So Mars may not be more enjoyable than this world. It's just a curiosity that people have. To go there. So we believe in past and future lives, and we may be born in one world and next time in another world. And so, to the best of our ability, we should take care of our environment, ecology. If there is a beginning to the world, there naturally there is going to be a time when the world subsists and then in the end goes out of existence. So the whole trichilocosm, the 3,000 world systems, as we say, goes through this process of coming into being and coming out of going out of existence. And we will be born also in other world systems. As Buddhists, we do pray for being taken care of by our masters, spiritual masters, and be able to receive the nectar of their teachings and finally reach the Vajradhara state. And so we can think of being born in another world system when this world goes out of existence. So we need to feel anxious about this world going out of existence. So when you are narrow-minded, short-sighted, then you will not be able to think broadly. So we should think broadly. So that's the end of today's. So wherever we are living, we cannot forget that we are Tibetans. We have the blood of, Tibetan blood. So we are the people or the descendants of our ancestors, King Songtsen Gampo and so forth, down the line of generations. And today, by using this internet, amongst the Tibetans, as I said before, we should preserve amongst ourselves by exchanging our culture and tradition, by using this internet. So please whip up your courage to do that.
남이 양양 신부이나
So living in America, if you are distracted
아주 패시 배워
by materialistic way of life,
디찬스 싱그러 봐.
it's not use. So if you look at the people, the Westerners in America,
저기 디저트디 아메리게
maybe compared to the Westerners, the Tibetans may be more calm. As I said before, one of the members of the Pritzker family in Chicago has told me that they wanted the Tibetan tradition of being humble and moral and so forth to be an example to their own people. And then people in Switzerland and other countries also have praised Tibetans for their humility, kindness and morality. So please keep up with these. Thank you.